Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Thirsty Thursday live stream. My name is Pat, also known as InfoSec Pat. Today, we're going to be speaking about API hacking and how to get into API hacking with one of the founders of API University. So, if you guys are ready, I want to bring him in. He can introduce himself and we can go about learning about API hacking. So, here we go, and let's welcome Dan. What's
Hey,
up?
thanks so much, Pat.
How you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate
Yo,
it.
you're very welcome. And we spoke a few months or maybe a few weeks. I don't even know, maybe a month and a half ago. And speaking about like the courses and what you guys have offerings, and I was super thrilled to hear all about the fun stuff. I want to actually put the chat over here so we can see that coming up.
All right.
And I was super stoked to learn because obviously web application stuff is not my strong point, and I won't take your, flavor away. I'll let you guys, let you speak on the courses, what you guys
Yeah.
have to offer. And yeah, I guess let's hear about who you are and what API security was all about.
Yeah, sure thing. Name's Dan Barahona, and about a year and a half ago, me and my buddy Corey Ball, we created APIsec University, or APIsec, however you want to say it. And it was sort of a crazy idea. Corey, a lot of your audience might know he's sort of the godfather of hacking APIs. He wrote this book here, Hacking APIs, on No Starch, and we helped him with that as best we could, and he launched that about 2 years ago. And when he was done, it was kind of like, okay, well, now what? And he had this idea of like, well, what if we made a course out of the book? And I thought it was a fabulous idea. And so he went and recorded the course, and I kind of slapped together a website, and we launched it, back in August of 2022. And much to our surprise, it just like went nuts. Like the people loved the course. They were signing up by the thousands.
Hmm.
And we got thinking, well, geez, we must be onto something. Let's add some more. So APIsec University, you can find it at apisecuniversity.com. We're now up to like almost 10 different courses, all about API security topics, things like API pen testing, API documentation, OWASP API top 10. We got a course on API security fundamentals, which is kind of like your just sort of like your basic intro to the topic.
Hmm.
We got courses on API gateways and PCI compliance and connected cars, securing API servers, all that kind of good stuff. And the cool thing is all those courses are free, right? We don't charge for any of it. There's no sales pitches. There's no vendors in there. It's just really great content. And every course has quizzes and certifications, so you can earn a badge, put a certificate on your LinkedIn profile. And yeah, it just kind of took off. We're now 18 months old, and we're about to cross 70,000 students enrolled in our courses. 3/4 of the Fortune 100 are enrolled as well. And we got all kinds of cool, fun stuff that I'd be happy to talk to you about. But that's kind of like what we got started with. And it's been a whole lot of fun and really rewarding. People, we've gotten just such positive feedback on the course content. They really like what we're up to.
Yeah, and so do I. I do have one question about the course, and I think I know the answer, but maybe people want to know as well. Why is everything free?
Yeah. Why is everything free? It's a good question. I mean, look, I work for a company called APIsec AI, or APIsec.ai, and that's who pays my bills.
Hmm.
And it's a technology company that makes API security testing technology. You will
Hmm.
never hear us talk about it in the courses.
Hmm.
But we thought it was really important to try to provide something, to help educate and raise awareness in the community. It started off with the one course, and we never expected it to take off like it did. And so we just wanted to keep going, honestly. And so I'm grateful that my boss lets me do this. It's really pretty much all I work on these days. And And so thanks to the generosity of the company, we're able to give this stuff for free. It's not why we're in business. We're not a university to try to make money or get a profit out of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that the community enjoys it so much just inspires us to keep going, right? Um,
Yep.
we do have a couple things that are paid on the website. We launched these in the last few months. They're paid certifications or exams,
Mm-hmm.
and I imagine we'll talk more about it. But there are two of them. They don't even come close to covering the bills of the university. But it's really like some of these exams have hard costs for us, so we just want to make sure we're not negative. But
Yep.
no, the main thing is like I have a boss who supports what we're doing and sees the value of it, and that's it. So we're really I have this very fun job. I get to go out and just you know my all I do all day long is try to think like how can we add more and more value to this
Mm-hmm.
community, and
Yep.
that's a ton of fun.
Yeah. So, and that's obviously, like you said, the two certifications out there that you can pay 100, a buck 25 and 450 for an entry level one, and then like more of a professional one. And
Yep.
that, it's more to, you have an overhead, you have a website, you have some kind of hosting that you're hosting this courses. So
Oh
that
yeah.
all costs money. So that's coming out of your pocket at at a, being generous to give back to the community. So if we can speak on, okay, so let's take a step back. Like, I'm brand new to the field. Who are these courses for? Like,
Yeah.
do you have to be into, IT or cybersecurity? Like,
Sure.
like who are these really aimed for? Is it like, oh man, like I'm a pen tester, I do network pen testing, externals,
Yep.
Wi-Fi, and I know shit about APIs and web apps. I want to
Yep.
come to API, university or APIsec university, and am I going to be able to learn enough through all of these courses or just the API penetration testing course and get the, what is it,
Yeah.
the ASCP
The
certification,
ASCP.
and
Yeah.
will I be able to perform API pen tests?
You know what? There's something on this site for everybody. So if you know like absolutely nothing,
Hmm.
there's a course for you. Where I would start is it's called API Security Fundamentals. It's the second course that we ever created. And frankly, the origin of that was, the first course we created was API pen testing, right? And that's kind
Hmm.
of our flagship course. It's Corey's course. It's 12 hours long. You will learn how to like build your own hacking lab, how to do API recon, analyze endpoints, run, different types of test scenarios. So if you really want to learn how to hack APIs, there is no better place on the internet to do it. Like I say that with total confidence. It's really a remarkable course. But if you don't know anything about it, then go to the other course, which is API Security Fundamentals. And the reason why we built that course was a lot of companies were coming to me after the pen test course got launched, and they're like, "That stuff's awesome. We really need to upskill the whole organization, the developers who are making APIs, the people, the product owners who are defining the APIs, ops teams, security teams, compliance teams, you name it." And
Hmm.
they're like, "But we don't want them to take your hacking course. That's kind of overkill. Do you have something kind of like, a little bit lighter weight?"
Hmm.
And that was the inspiration to come up with the fundamentals. It's only 90 minutes long. And we go through like why APIs are under attack. Like, why do attackers love APIs? Let's go through some real world breaches, right? Like what
Hmm.
happened at Peloton and what happened at Coinbase and like,
Hmm.
Duolingo. Then we go through the OWASP top 10 in plain English, right? We go through some best practices, and it's super accessible, right? You don't really need to know anything. And that can be your starting point. And maybe that's enough for all you need to know, right? But if you want to keep going, right, then we got a whole course dedicated to the OWASP API top 10, right? And
Hmm.
I would go through there. We got a course on securing API servers that's going to tell you about course policies and rate limiting and error handling and all of these kinds of, you know, blocking and tackling nuts and bolts of API security. And if you want to keep going, you can go take the pen testing course as long as you're comfortable, like following instructions, typing commands, downloading, installing apps and stuff. Because Corey shows you everything, how to do it, right?
Sweet.
You could start at nothing and go all the way to like becoming a bug bounty hunter in this course.
Nice, nice. All right, so now we have two certification exams, and then we can change gears. So we
Yeah.
have the CASA. So this is obviously the entry level, the analyst one. So which course would be lined up to take this cert? Would it be the
Yeah.
fundamental one?
Yeah. So we have CASA or CASA, and then we
Yeah.
have ASCP, which is a not so subtle twist on OSCP. So CASA is Certified API Security Analyst.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the exam it's 100 question multiple choice exam. And it's really testing your knowledge of the OWASP API Security Top 10.
Okay.
And that's the course you want to take to prepare for the CASA exam, right? You
Gotcha.
take that course, you follow it carefully, you're in great shape to pass the CASA exam. $125. Excuse me. Then we have the ASCP, which is the API Security Certified Professional. And this is a really awesome exam. You are going to be handed 2 applications that you need to hack. And you've got to find the tokens, the flags, right? There are a total of 8 vulnerabilities we want you to find. If you find 6 of them, you pass, right?
Okay.
But this is going to prove your API hacking chops, right? If you pass the ASCP, which is not an easy exam to pass, we give you a couple of tries. You have serious API chops, hands down, no question about it. And the course, of course, to prepare you for that is the API penetration testing course. And you'll be well prepared for it, but it's definitely going to test your skills.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It has a little fancy little coin, right?
Oh yeah. Good little show and tell here. Yeah, there you go. I don't know if I could get that. There you go. I have not personally earned this, but there you go. And it's pretty badass. So Corey himself will. We got this airline on there because one of the exams or the apps you got to hack is called Happy Airlines. And but yeah, you'll get a hand signed certificate from Corey and the challenge coin, and it's pretty sweet.
That's sweet. So I see it like a one free retake. So apply blah blah blah. You get your fancy coin and a certificate. So the rules of engagement, you get to see that. Do you have to write a pen test report and like do like a debrief or like just like?
No. That's like different set of skills. Like, how do you document all that? What we want to know is, were you able to find them, right? And that's really testing your core technical skills. So in the exam UI itself, there's a little field at the very top where you submit your flags as you find them.
Fair enough. Gotcha.
And I got to tell you, we've got a Slack channel where we watch all the students as they're going through, and we're just like rooting for them and cheering and hoping they get to 6.
Yeah.
Some of them get to 8. A lot of them don't get there, but then they come back and try again, and we have a pretty good second chance success rate.
And that's awesome. And that's, a lot of people are doing that. And I think it's super, super important because, going into exams, me taking a lot of exams and it's anxiety, up the wazoo, right? Like you're going to, even if you hit start and the shit in and out, I don't know. It's just something, at least for me, like if I hit start and I see that first question, or if I'm like, now I'm inside of the exam, I'm like, my brain goes numb and I'm like, shit, I'm screwed. So it's definitely like, okay, like how long do you have to do the exam?
Yeah. So I admire everyone that takes the exam. Honestly, like I'm not technical enough to do it. I probably should give it a try, take Corey's course and go give it a whack. No, because what happens is, we set you up, you get your own environment, and it's just like, okay, here you go. Right. And there's no one going to tell you anything to do. It's like, you got to start poking around and trying things out. Right. There's no questions. It's not like, okay, try to find X, right? It's
Yeah.
just like, here's an app,
Yeah.
try to break it, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, I get it. And we've had people who are like incredibly, like savvy experts, give it a try and whiff, um, because it's just it's a different thing that they're probably used to doing every day, but if you take the course and you pay attention, you will be prepared to do it, right? So you
Yeah.
get to answer your question, you get 12 hours from the time you hit start to the
Okay.
time the environment goes away for you,
Okay.
and
Oh yeah, it says 12 hours. I'm an idiot. It says in the first one, 12
and you
hours.
can
Yeah.
take it whenever you want. You don't gotta schedule it with, like when you hit go, you're going, right?
Gotcha.
And so yeah, it's really cool. We launched it a couple of months ago, and I thought we'd have all kinds of bugs and things to fix in it, but it's been rock solid,
Sweet.
and so yeah, it's been really good.
So is this something that Corey built himself and he just threw it up there? Is it something that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so?
So I'll tell you, we Corey kind of scoped it, designed it, or came up with the rough idea behind it. But we had a fantastic partner. I'll give them a
Mm-hmm.
shout out. They're called Maltech, and a couple of awesome guys, upstate New York, and they just built this thing, and it's amazing. It's a really fantastic set of apps that they built. The whole environment is great, and we survey everybody that's taken the course or taken the exam, whether they passed it or not, and even the people that don't pass
Mm-hmm.
or are not on the first try, they're like, damn, that was real. That was super realistic,
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
and we haven't had anybody complain like, what the hell, that was crazy. That was totally unrealistic. No, we don't get any of that. It's been a really good experience for folks that have taken it. Some really cool posts by people online about, how they didn't pass the first time they went back. They really studied and, and beefed up some of their skills and came back and they nailed it. So it's a good learning experience for folks.
So I guess this is my last, on this topic. So I only submitted 4 flags. Want. So if I studied up and I go again, can I just save those 4 flags and submit them so I don't have to waste time to do those again?
Those 4 flags, you probably have a pretty, quick job of reproducing them the second time. It'll be a different set of flags, but you'll probably have a pretty good running start on it.
Okay.
But what I
Okay.
would say is like, if you've already tackled one of the two apps, focus on the other app, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you nail that, and then you still got time. Go knock out the first one. It should be a lot easier the second time around.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. This is actually exciting because, like I said, this is definitely a space that I'm green as the 4-leaf clover. So I have no idea. And studying for some other certifications that I'm looking to tackle before I get out to some conferences this year.
Yeah, right on.
And like this is something I definitely want to just give a jingle to. At least I'll do the first one first, right? Like I'll do the Casa one,
Yeah,
and just to see how I am with it, and then shoot for I'll probably knowing me, I'll probably do better on the harder one because there's no questions and I don't have to
yeah.
read 100 questions. But yeah, that's
Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm sure you'll do great, right? And the interesting thing is like, I think why the website's done so well is, API has been around for a long time, but as a security threat vector,
hmm
it's really just kind of exploded, right? And over the last few years, we've seen so many breaches, so many pretty high profile
hmm
attacks. But it's still kind of like, from a security perspective, it's still kind of a new landscape, right? And
hmm
and I think we kind of got lucky and stepped in right when there was this void here. I mean, Corey found, like, he didn't want to write the book. He wanted to read the book. And when he looked around, he's like, oh, there's no book, right? So he just started making notes for himself. And after a couple of 100 pages, he was like, maybe I'll write the book, right?
yeah.
And then he got published, and then he was like, no, maybe we'll make the course too, right? And so
hmm
that's what we've been on this journey, and it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what are like what does the future look like for you folks?
Yeah, right on. So, we started with the one course and we're like, all right, that was a success. Let's see if we are a one-hit wonder or we can do more. And then we did the second course and that did good. So we've been adding, last year, 2023, we went from one course to about 8.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing is between Corey and me, we've been making courses, but now we have other third parties. So like our documentation course was created by this guy, Jason Harmon, who is hands down the expert on API documentation. It's a fabulous course. We had another partner upstream do a course on connected car security,
Mm-hmm.
another partner do a gateway course, and so forth. So for this year, we have a whole long list of stuff that's coming. It's some pretty cool thing. We have a course on monitoring, on API security policy. We have a basic one on just plain old working with APIs. Like if you don't know what an API is, there's going to be a course for you on how to use an API and a whole bunch of other really cool things. But then we started to see like, well, what else could we do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of midway through last year, we started doing webinars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like conversations like this. We'll get some interesting person and be like, all right, let's talk about, like, we got this guy, Sam Curry, last year.
Mm-hmm.
That dude is amazing. He and his buddies, like, just for fun, they're like, oh, I wonder if I could hack that scooter over there. Right. And in like 5 minutes, they had all these scooters like honking and flashing their horns. And they're like, oh, that was kind of easy. I wonder if I could hack that car. And they spent the next few months and they hacked everything. Like you name it. If your car has a mobile app, they probably hacked it, right? Unlock the door, start the engine, like all from like the VIN number or something. And so anyways, so we've been having these really cool webinars, right? And we get over like 1,000 people showing up on these webinars. We have one on Tuesday on API governance, excuse me, which is not like the sexiest topic, but it's super important, right? It's so, all right. So we got a bunch of webinars, and if you come to our website, you can see them always at the tip top of the website, like what our next one is. And then we started doing these workshops. So like a lot of companies are like, hey, could you come in and do a talk for us? Because we really need people to understand this stuff, right? Like why APIs are getting hacked and, the OWASP top 10 and everything. And so we started doing these 1-hour workshops, and they're basically like condensed versions of the fundamentals course. And it's been going great. Like companies all over the world are like, yeah, we need our engineers to know like why APIs are getting hacked and what they can do to make them, more secure and so forth. So we even have a little button in the top of our website that says, request a workshop, right? And so if you work at a company and you think that like, you should come in and do a lunch and learn or whatever the hell you want to call it, you could do that and still free, right? Like literally still free. Like I'll show up, virtual, and we'll do a whole hour-long session and make it fun and interesting. We put a lot of real world stories in there, and that just makes it a lot less boring. So yeah, we've been doing these workshops a lot, and I don't know, we got a couple other tricks up our sleeve that hopefully we're going to roll out here later this year as well.
Nice. I think that's super, super, super cool. Like especially like this is the future, right? Like if we look at pen testing, and as everyone knows, like I'm more on the network side, the system side, the infrastructure side. And now, if you go for like a penetration tester and you look at the job lead or the job, a lot of stuff is web app, APIs, mobile, everything is going that route. And if you stay complacent thinking, okay, like I'm going to do network pen testing, and yeah, now you can move to the cloud and Azure and AWS and hacking containers and using some cool stuff like that. So it's like, man, now we have to sharpen our skills and get to that level of, because this is, the future. And you can answer it, or or you can say I don't know, but like, do you think the future of like regular traditional network pen testers and like system pen testers, we'll always need them because there's going to be a network or an infrastructure, But do you think that's going to go more to the wayside, and then like more like web app stuff is going to take precedence?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with that world, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
suspect it's always going to be needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to make sure you're locking the doors and closing the windows and doing all the like good best practices, blocking and tackling. But
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting, like when we go through all these real world breaches,
Mm-hmm.
like what's interesting to me is like what's not happening. All right. So like what's not happening, and I used to work for a big, vulnerability management company, right? And we used to track all the CVEs and everything, right? And the C and V in CVE are common vulnerability, common, right? Like lots of people could have this if you have the unpatched version of whatever thing
Mm-hmm.
but what we see with API breaches is they're not common. They're unique, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're your own flaws, things that you left open, or your own logic flaws and things like that, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
don't see like cross-site scripting breaches. You don't see injection attacks. I mean, it happens, but that's not really the reason why companies get hacked. Um, they're looking for business logic flaws, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like at Coinbase, when user was able to use the API to change what they owned to
Mm-hmm.
something they didn't own and sell it for way more money, and it worked, right? That's a logic flaw, right?
Yeah.
And or other things like the things that we see all the time, right? And it actually maps well to the OWASP top 10 for API. So like number one on the OWASP is broken object level authorization, keyword authorization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dan access Pat's records, right? That's an
Mm-hmm.
authorization flaw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we see tons and tons and tons of examples of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like postal service, right? You could use the API and look up your records or your neighbor's records or Michael Jordan's records, anybody's records,
Yep.
right? That's an authorization flaw, right? It's not a CVE, right? You screwed up the logic in your app, right? It should say Dan can only see Dan's records, end of story. But that line of code isn't in there, and suddenly it's wide open,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's OAuth number one. OAuth number two is broken authentication. And this one is kind of infuriating because it's so basic that you can't believe that this is happening. Which is the definition of OAuth 2 is broken, weak authentication, authentication that's susceptible to brute force or password, credential stuffing or something like that. But honestly, like 9 times out of 10, when we see a broken auth vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
it's no auth. It's just wide open,
Mm-hmm.
right? And why? Because they never thought anyone would find it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is why like developers need to be educated, right? Like Peloton, right? They
Mm-hmm.
had some API that was powering the app, right? Like I don't know how to find that, right? But if you're remotely savvy, or if you took Corey's course, now you know how to do it. You can watch the traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd be like, "Oh, there's an API. There's an API. I wonder if I can call that API directly." And somebody found the API, and they tried it, and it worked. And that API had access to all 4 million users' accounts.
Yeah.
Everybody, even Joe Biden's records, right? And so, like, here, I'm kind of on a tangent
No,
here,
it's
or
good.
on a rant, maybe, but like, um, yeah, tell me about it, Mike. Like, pour lots of examples, right? Like, I'm in most of these breaches, like Peloton and Venmo and Duolingo, like you name it. But the one that's infuriating is, and developers think if the API is just sort of like behind the scenes, right? It's not in some like portal or marketplace, like published.
Mm-hmm.
The people aren't going to find it and they're not going to mess with it, right? But that is like the number one thing hackers are going to do, right? Because they know that's what people think,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if the API is sort of behind the scenes, that it's kind of inherently secure, we don't have to worry about it. And what you find is APIs that have no authentication,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's wide open to the world if you know how to use them, and they have no authorization controls.
Mm-hmm.
And this is maybe my other rant, which is we rely way too much on the UI as part of security, right? Like the UI is where we authenticate you. It's where we filter what data you can see, what buttons you can press, all these things, right? UIs are really good for controlling and restricting,
Mm-hmm.
right? But guess what? Hackers are going to go right around the UI and they're going to find the APIs and hit them directly. So all those controls that you put in place are gone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're finding APIs that are over permissioned,
Yeah.
return too much data, don't have these controls in place, right? And so I don't know how I got on this rant here, Pat, but
No,
like
I love it.
to your question about like network pen testing, like that's going to exist, but like there's this whole new world of shit where people are being very successful hacking into APIs.
Yeah. No, and I think that's super, super important because at the end of the day, it's like every application, calls home for something. Same thing with the Microsoft thing, right? Using what MS Graph, that's an API. You know what I mean? Like everything you think about it, we don't think about it on a daily, but if you really think about it, it's like, man, fuck, like what doesn't really have an API called? Right? Like what's not, So it's like we don't really think about that on a daily, but it's so true. And it's
Right.
like, damn, son, like we are screwed. So this,
Well, I mean, there's this statistic that's super highly cited, and it's actually really old. It's like from 2019 or something. Akamai did this study of all the traffic on their networks,
mm-hmm,
and they found 83% of their traffic was APIs communicating, right? And so, like, yeah, they're everywhere, right? Which is great. It's fine. Like APIs are awesome,
mm-hmm,
right? It's why I can be on my Google Map and request an Uber,
yeah,
right? Like that's APIs. It's why I can connect my Venmo to my Wells Fargo
yeah,
account, right? APIs,
yeah.
right? So APIs are awesome, but like, we're putting like developers under all this pressure to constantly put out new code and new features and new bug fixes and all this stuff, and they don't have time to think about all this stuff,
Securing
right?
it exactly, yeah. And yeah, and that's like because if you think about it, like unless you're like doing AppSec, but like normally for a developer they just want their code to work. Once their codes work, they can compile it and then deploy it and then put it into QA or whatever, however they work their logic and their workflow. And then it's like, oh shit, okay, it's working. I compiled it, I made the executable, whatever they're doing, or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like, okay, it's working, so let's just keep it moving. And they're not
Yeah.
really securing it properly. And same thing on the network side, right? Same thing on the network. It's the same exact shit. Like when I was a sysadmin, when I was doing system administration, system engineering, whatever, it's like we want to get this domain controller up. We want to get users into the domain. And me, I say this all the time. Like I'm a victim of like when I would make a whatever a SQL service or a QuickBooks service or whatever kind of service, I would always put that pass. This is before the whole password vaults and all these things that we have today, password managers. But I used to put
Yep.
like the password in the description, right? I used to do that. Me,
Yeah.
I was that person. And even even like like when you're doing Cisco and whatever, if I don't know how the Cisco stuff is. I'm not doing routing switching anymore. But like when you would look at show run and config pipe include whatever SSH or whatever the key is, or secret 7 or whatever that is, you could take that and then put that on Cisco secret 7 cracker and just throw that little piece of code and get it in clear text, and secret 5 and whatever. So it's just like we don't think about it as just like engineers and practitioners or whatever. We just want to get the stuff out, get it working, and then that's it.
That's right.
And then
Well, that's right. And that's why like these workshops I think have been really popular because look, we don't need our developers to become cybersecurity professionals,
mhm,
right? They don't need to get degrees or any of that crap,
mhm,
right? They need to have awareness,
mhm,
right? Like a sensitivity to it because like that that Coinbase example where like the person changed like Ethereum to Bitcoin,
mhm,
right? Like Coinbase did a great job of like responding, reacting. They shut it down, they reproduced it, they fixed it in a day, right?
mhm,
And I bet it was one line of code. and they blogged about it a week later. You can find this online, and they said the problem was missing logic validation check. Okay, what that means was the app was checking if you own 10 units of whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't checking what you owned, right? So as long as you put any value in the asset field, it'd be like, okay, I'm going to sell it as Bitcoin, right? I'm going to sell it as whatever. And that's a logic flaw, right? Now, like if you think about like what we do from like testing automation perspective, like if we're going to push new code, right, we go into a CI/CD pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
right, and it goes through unit testing, and performance testing, and integration testing, and all this stuff, right? Make sure it does what it's supposed to do,
Yeah.
right? And in the case of like Coinbase, like, does the app let you sell something you own? Yes, great, go, right? But what they didn't test was, does it allow you to sell something you don't own, right? And if you just have that mindset, like, I need to make sure I don't trust anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is one of our big, like, sort of best practices or pro tips is like, do not trust anything that comes into your API, right? You have to input validate, right? And so, like, make sure there's not an injection or malicious URL or someone's changed their asset from Ethereum to Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, as long as we could get the people creating and defining and operating the APIs to be savvy to like, this is what attackers are trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
I think we could improve our security a ton just from that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then arm the security teams with tools like, better testing and, detection and all these kinds of things. I think we'll end up with a lot more secure APIs out of that.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I think so too. I think once I'm probably going to start this, and I'm probably going to make like an accountability video. Like once I announce that I'm actually studying for this. And I think I'll probably go for this. Hopefully by June, I'll start like,
Right on.
studying for it. And hopefully, by, I don't know how long it should take me to study for it. Maybe 2 months, 3 months, you think, for preparation?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can't wait to send you one of those things, man.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Six Flag. Let's see. And yeah, so obviously, we're about 40 minutes in. I know you had some, some personal stuff to do. So I want to see, is there any questions? I'm not, haven't really been looking at the chat. Is there, right, are there percentages of how many people passed on your first? Okay, that's a question for you.
Oh yeah. It's probably around 50%, maybe even a little less, to be honest with you. And I think that's okay, right? Like, sometimes people will email me and they'll be like, I can't believe I failed. I'm like, dude, it's okay, right? Don't be discouraged. This is not easy stuff, right? And we're like, look, make sure you go review this section of Corey's course. Make sure you read the instructions really carefully. There's little hints, there's little tips in there, what you need to be focused on. Because sometimes people just get way off on a tangent, right? And they just start trying to like dictionary attack and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? It's like, you're overthinking it, right? Like follow the
like methodology
manual.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And it's the same thing with outside, right? Like rabbit holes. It happens to me, and I think it happened to me and Own the other night, right? We were doing, I think like I don't know, attack avidity, whatever, on try hack me some AD stuff, because a course I'm doing from PMPT, so like doing AD hacking and stuff like that, and I'm like, something wasn't working, and then I was like going down this rabbit hole, doing something else, and I'm like, okay, and it was getting late too. So then I was like, let me just refocus, and then it's like, oh shit, like what? I'm going way off in left field. I should have done this and that prior, and I have a little notepad of my methodology, of my steps I normally take for my internal assessments, and I didn't follow it, right? I was going off, I was skipping stuff, and it's like, that's why documentation, and I hate it. Like me personally, I hate documenting. I'm one of those we
don't have that as a requirement. But let me just answer like maybe the next question, which is like, how many people pass on the second try? And I would bet it's like 80%, right? So I don't want to scare people away, like, don't even try. Like, no, this is a really good test of your skills, right? And these are learnable skills, right? You take the course, follow it carefully, build your lab, go through the process, and you'll get there, right? And we've had people get 8 out of 8, like, in a couple hours on the first try. Like like there's no like secret science here, or you got to get lucky or something like that. Like, if you got the skills, you're gonna do just fine. And I saw your message. I think there was a comment from Mike about pen testing will just evolve to include the new as it has for many years. I totally agree with that. But the one caveat I'll make is, like, we're sort of accustomed to doing pen testing by hand, like, hire a firm or something like that, like come in once or twice a year and beat on the systems and try to find things and all that kind of thing. But here's the issue I think we have, which is like, if you run a pen test twice a year, even, which is probably a lot, you're going to be releasing code still like 52 times a year, right? Or 365 times a year, right? So that's like a lot of code going out there that hasn't really been security pressure tested, and that's why we think you just have to start looking at continuous assessment, right?
Yep.
Automation, coming up with capabilities that will actually, like, not just test your APIs for the happy path, right? Can I sell the stuff that I'm supposed to sell? But the negative path, right? And just pressure test the API on every build, on every release. And because you're never going to slow down develop. Remember, like, way back when, 20, 30 years ago, like, there was a dot release like every 6 months, and in between nothing happened, right? Like, okay, you could test that one, right? And only when you're happy does it go live. That doesn't happen anymore, right? We're launching code every day or every hour, or certainly, pretty frequently. So the testing's got to keep up. And I think right now, it's not. And that's an area we gotta beef up.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Hey, Dylan. How do you prevent injection flaws of an API?
That's a good question. I mean, look, there are a couple of things. Number one, we want to make sure developers understand what an injection flaw is, and don't create the vulnerability in the first place. Number two is input validation, right? So, like, don't just accept whatever gets thrown into your API and run it. Like the example, I'm not that sophisticated, so I use very stupid basic examples. And if you've got an app that has like a user profile functionality, right? So you can put your name, hometown, address, LinkedIn profile, Twitter handle, whatever, right? So imagine like that form field that says enter your LinkedIn URL, right? So imagine instead of putting LinkedIn URL, you put in an injection or local host user data, or an injection, right? Some sort of like SQL command or something, right? Like, if anything that doesn't look like a LinkedIn URL shows up, you just ignore it. Like, throw it away. It doesn't even matter, right? Like, you have to validate everything that comes into your API. And if it doesn't match what you're expecting to see, you throw it away, right? And that alone will probably eliminate any injections that you got, right? Next thing is test, right? Like, actually test your APIs and run injections on it. This is easily automatable, and come talk to me if you want to learn how to do it. But yes, you can automate that. And so find out if you have injection vulnerabilities before they go live, right? And then you use tools like an API gateway, or, like WAFs are pretty sophisticated these days to API payloads, right? And so there's like lots of layers to make sure you're not getting exposed to an injection. And in fact, we've got a survey running right now that we're asking people like what kinds of vulnerabilities they're most worried about. And injections actually, interestingly, are fairly low down the list, right? Because I mean, I don't know, between you and me, like, if you get breached through an injection, like, shame on you, man. Like, like there's like 8 different ways that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, that's That's facts. So Mike, Red Teams, FTW, Postman is okay. Hey Dan, Michael. Hey Mike.
Hey, Lisi, how are you, bud?
Any other questions? Makes sense. Awesome. You can say that's awesome. Let's see. Any other questions in here? Owned. My wife has a Peloton bike.
Oh, it's crazy. Like these examples that we got, like, well, actually, I'll give you a new example. This is hot off the press. So, like a week ago, Trello, 15 million accounts harvested, right? And this is a good example of like getting the developers to think about business logic and business, functionality abuse, right? So, I'm sure most people here have used Trello at some point, right? So they got this feature that's like, if I want to invite you to my Trello board, I can invite you using your email address, right? And but what's not like on Trello you have public profiles, right? It'll have whatever your handle is and whatever details that are publicly accessible, but it is not associated with your email address. Okay, well, this person found that if he uses that API endpoint that says I want to invite Pat using Pat's email address, and if Pat has a valid account, it's going to show me Pat's public profile. So now I've connected his email address to his public profile using this API, right? And so what they did was they just literally guessed like millions and millions of times, not just millions of times, literally 500 million times. And they found 15 million matches. Okay. And then, of course, they put it for sale on the dark web. So they took all this public profile data and connected it to their private email address, right? Which can probably be connected to a whole bunch of other phishing useful information, right? And it's all because there was this legit business feature, which is I need to be able to invite you by email, right? But two problems. One, that API endpoint was unauthenticated. So you could just blast it, as many times as you want. And the rate limiting that they had, like this person was like using proxies and rotating IPs and all that kind of stuff. Like they tested it 500 million times, right? Like, how does that happen? I mean, look, I don't want to, I don't know what it takes to stop brute forcing. I know it's a lot of art, right? And how do you know it's the same person? But the first thing they did was they're like, okay, no more unauthenticated access to that API endpoint. And guess what? Yes, you could create a bunch of free accounts, right? But now you got to send all those requests from a valid user, right? Now think about the rate limiting challenge there. You're like, all right, why is Dan sending 500 million requests or even 1 million requests or even 1,000 requests, right? So, but it just goes to show like the feature was make sure people can invite. That's a must-have feature. But then it got abused, right? And 15 million records got harvested.
Yeah, that's bananas. I believe the most recent film was input into that's I think injection availability can go and develop an API as a native language.
You know what, Adele, thanks for the comment. You've probably gone over my head with the technical. I don't know, Pat, you got an opinion on this one?
No, this is because this is not something I know much about. The injection of further development.
I think the comment about like the frameworks will validate input. I gotta believe that's true. I believe you, Adele, but like, but that relies on you to have defined what you're validating. Like, a lot of times we see API documentation. They're like, okay, this takes a string. Okay, well, lots of things can look like a string. An injection can look like a string, right? A malicious URL can look like a string. So, you still got to sit there and define what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. And the developers got to do that. Right. Like, maybe in with AI and all kinds of stuff, that'll be less necessary. But like, you still got to sit down and say, like, this is what it needs to look like. And anything else, doesn't match. Right. We throw it away. And Echo's comment, you're right, 700 million on LinkedIn. So probably everybody on this call harvested, right? Cambridge Analytica, remember that?
Yeah.
API abuse, same sort of thing, right? So, yeah, I mean, what's amazing to me is like, despite all this stuff, like a lot of companies are still kind of like waiting and seeing, and like, what are we going to do about APIs? And they're not. We don't see the level of urgency
Hmm.
that it deserves, right? And hopefully, we're going to see that change.
Yeah. No, most definitely. Yeah. So obviously, if there's any, obviously I want to be courteous of your time. If there's any more questions, we'll take it for a couple more minutes, and we'll let Dan go on his merry way. And I really appreciate your time tonight. It was it was cool. It was cool learning about this, and hopefully I can get that cool little badge and that little token at some point.
Can't wait, man.
At some point, and I'm super stoked about this. Like when I start hearing about it, and like when I hear about something, it intrigues me and it hypes me up even more. Like you can read about it, you can do all that, like about the reverse engineering, right? I didn't know shit about it before I went to B-side Orlando last year with a couple of friends. That my friend signed me up for it, and I didn't even know what I was getting into. And then I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
like this is pretty interesting. And then I had, a reverse engineering expert on, and then I'm gonna have another one on, like, and she was amazing. She actually taught the workshop that I was at, and I was like, all right, you make it a little more, it's making a little more sense. The first time around when I was using these tools, I was completely lost. Like, oh, reverse engineer this
yeah,
assembly. I'm like, fuck, I don't even know what the fucking assembly is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know what any of this stuff is.
yeah,
So, and I'm like, okay, now it's starting to make more sense. And then, like, when you're tinkering with it, and now when you're doing, like, for example, malware analysis, and you're taking malware and even anything, you can reverse engineer anything, and when you start tinkering with this, it's like, okay, it starts getting more intriguing. So it's like, once someone
yeah.
sparks that interest, it's easier. And then when you talk about it and
Oh yeah,
it's like, okay, now it hypes you up even more. So now it's like, what is it, 6 months ago, 5 months ago that I went to that B side, and now I can, I can talk a little bit about malware and about
oh yeah,
reverse engineering, and understanding a lot more than I did, 5 months ago. So that goes to show that if like, okay, API hacking, I know shit about it today, which is, February 1st, maybe in October 1st, which is what, 8 months away, I'm like, okay, like I can talk about this. I know what you're talking about, the, you know, API OS bot top 10 with broken authentication and blah, 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 blah.
yeah.
And yeah, so I'm super stoked about that. So, all right. So, thank you. Is there any program knowledge?
Bring me back on the show
Yeah.
in 8 months, and let's see how you've done. And what's interesting is like we have all these people that probably started like you, and we have all these people that have taken every single one of the courses, right? There's almost like a mad rush, like who can be the first to have every single one of our certs, is there programming knowledge involved when testing APIs? Interesting thing is, no, not necessarily, right? A lot of times we say this is API security, but really we're not testing APIs, we're testing the apps. But the APIs are the vehicle to communicate, to interact with the app, right? So instead of a web UI where I use a mouse to click, I'm using an API. In fact, some people say APIs are just websites for machines.
Mm,
And when you use a website, you don't need to know what the backend's written in, all
yeah.
right? Is it Java or C# or whatever the hell, Python? You don't need to know that, right? A hacker doesn't need to know it. They're not going to touch that code, right? What you are trying to do is to manipulate the interface, right? Like in a web app, right? Stuff something into the form fields or into a URL bar.
Hmm.
And in an API, you're just doing it at the endpoint level, right? And you're using gets and puts and posts and so forth like that. So you need to learn that kind of stuff, which you can learn on Corey's course. But you don't need to know Python or anything like that, right? That's why, like, I have a lot of people that are like, I want to become a bug bounty hunter in APIs. I'm like, great, you could do it, right?
Mm.
Take the course, follow instructions, and you can become that, right? You don't need to be a coder.
And that reassures me because I don't know shit about coding. So,
Me too.
yeah, awesome. So, like I said, I really want to thank you, Dan. Yeah, I will definitely take you up on that. We'll definitely keep in touch, and
Right on.
I'll hit you up once I start studying for it. And I'll tell you, okay, this is. I'll make the announcement. Hey, I'm going for what is it called? I already forgot the A, whatever the hell it is.
ASCP.
ASCP, and this is the course. This is my this is my journey. This is how I'm documenting my journey, just like how I'm doing with the PMPT, and I post some places when I'm studying for it, where I'm at in the process. But I'm super stoked about this process. So, any last words that you have for the viewers? How can people
Oh man,
find you
um,
and connect with you if that's okay with you?
by all means. First of all, thank you. You can find the website, APIsecUniversity.com. I don't know if we put my name. Oh, it's right there, Dan Barahona. So Dan at APIsecUniversity.com if you want to email me. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm super accessible. I love to keep in touch with our community. It's a really tight knit one. We've got a Discord channel as well, and that's, I don't know, we got 7,000 people there or something like that. So lots of ways to be in touch. But the main thing is go to the website, find a course you like, hit the enroll button, and you're on your way. Maybe come join us in some of our webinars, or if you think your company would be interested, hit the workshop button, and yeah, just stay involved. Just be part of the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Dan. Thank you so much. And I thank you all for checking us out. If you have any comments, leave it in the, in the comment. I always say description in the comment section. If you're watching this after the fact, and, if you have any questions for Dan, hit him up directly, and have a beautiful evening, everyone. And thank you and much love. Take care.